Hey everybody, I have an update for you. Found out some more things, and I fine-tuned some of the things that I had figured out as far as the puzzle goes. We're going to go into what I wanted to show you here real quick is I decided to switch from a graphic skull to an actual photo of a medical. It's a medical photo of a real skull that you're looking at right here. And of course, the purpose of doing that was just basically to see the real thing. I wanted to compare the real Egyptian art, which we've already seen, the Eye of Ra, to a real skull. There's really no difference. This skull is prettier to look at anyway. But basically, what I wanted to find out is by looking at a real skull, was there anything I could determine by looking at the Eye of Ra? And there was. But if you remember, the Eye of Ra that we were being shown did two things. It showed us not only the skull using that particular hieroglyph, but it also showed us the inside of the brain as well. So what I needed to see the brain as well. And so what I did was I took the same skull and I put a brain in there. And the brain is lined up properly with the correct space in the front and the back. And let me show you what we can see right here. So when we look at the Eye of Ra, first of all, you're going to notice this piece of the bone right here. And on here, you're going to notice that that's what this thing is right here. This thing goes around that curve, just like you see right here. And if you notice, the stem of this thing goes right down the throat, just like you see right here. Okay. The next part of it, you see this bar. It's coming up right here, and it ends right on where the jawbone basically connects. You can see the same thing right here, and how this piece works as well. And when you take a look at the bar and the pons that's inside it, you see this is the spinal cord coming right up, and then it's going to bend, right? And then this creates this trapezoid that you see right here, which contains the pons. And just like we've seen before, when this bar comes down, if you can see where the cerebellum cuts in, it goes right down that, and it does that on every one of them when you take a look. And here's the interesting part right here on this Eye of Ra. I was able to get a lot closer as to what we're looking at right here. If you can see, the thalamus has this, it almost looks like this thing coming off the top of it, and you can see the slope of it, how it comes down. Well, when you take a look at this right here, that slope goes right into the top part of the eye, and in this area that you see right back here, right smack dab in the middle of that thing is where the pineal gland is located. Also, we didn't look at this before, but this right here is this what we call the throne, and this is where everything sits. And so, if you notice on this side right here, as it begins to open up, that you see right here, that's where the throne sits. It sits right where it begins to open up. You can see right above the pons where it starts right here, basically is where your throne is. And that's where it starts. Also, take a look at this. The little dip that comes out follows this optic chiasm. Now, what I'm not totally sure of yet is it looks like the Eye of Ra could possibly slightly be moved down, because we don't know if it's the cavity right here that this belongs in, or if it belongs right along the optic chiasm, which I think it's correct the way that it is now, because we have this area up here matching so perfectly that we see. Now, do you remember this little scene that you see right here, and you see this particular hieroglyph in the background? And it's this thing right here. And what this actually does for us, it gives us a lot of good information, because the fingers tell us what he's actually doing is cradling the skull with his hands, and his thumb is on one side of the spinal column, and his fingers are acting as part of the cervical column, or the cervical part of the spine, on the other side of the spinal column, and this runs straight up, and this area that you see right here is the pons. Well, what I decided to do is I decided to go ahead and take this image also and add it to the other one so that we could see it all together. So this is what we're interested in, and what we did is I put this on top of it as well, and you can see where his hands are. And what I did is I slightly made it transparent in the middle so we could actually see where his thumb was. And as I said, his thumb is on one side of the spinal cord, and his fingers are coming around, touching the area where the skull. So what you can see about this here on both of these, with and without, is you can see that his thumb is on one side of the spinal cord, and his fingers come out and they curve along this thing right here. And then you have these two fingers right here, and these are basically coming in and creating this. So you have the outline of 4 fingers right here, with the first 2 coming around here. So we see this right up here. We've already taken a look at that, but now we're going to look at this rest of this thing here. You're going to notice that on this guy right here, do you see this bar coming up the angle right here? Well, that bar is the same as this bar right here that you see here. So when we look at this, they basically lay right on top of each other. The reason why that is just because it's creating this trapezoid right here that the pons fits in, which is right here. So everything's coming up here, and then when you get to this point, right here, which is where this thing stops, as you can see they're now lined up properly. This area right here, it stops here. This is the midbrain, so the midbrain is next, and you can see that it follows the line right here. And the cerebellum rests right here, right on top of the throne, and the pons in the same location. You see them right in here. And as we continue up, this top part, and I don't know what it's called, the top part of the corpus callosum that runs along the top sticks out. But if you notice, these 3 pieces, they come together, so it kind of fits inside this area right here. And the thalamus, notice that this box right here runs at an angle, and what it's doing, it's running at the same angle. You see how it goes slightly up? Well, the reason it's doing that is because when we take a look at the Eye of Ra right here, and the way that this thing comes off of the thalamus and comes back here, well, that's what this box is doing also. So it's also following the same line as the Eye of Ra. And then this right here is right on top of the thalamus. So all of these pieces, this is definitely, it's most definitely what this is dealing with. It's dealing with the human body, and I've got this matched up correctly. So let me show you the next part. Before I even go into that, I wanted to kind of get my share real quick, because all of this stuff that I'm finding with these hieroglyphs, if you guys have followed me at all for a while, what this stuff is doing is I discovered a lot of this stuff before I even looked at the hieroglyphs. The hieroglyphs have helped me learn about anatomy a lot more. But as far as some of this esoteric or hidden stuff, as far as reality and stuff like that goes, what I'm finding in the alchemy and everything is exactly the same thing that I have been showing everybody for so long. This whole face and skull and everything, and how we mapped the whole body by Phi to the Nile, and how all the pieces along the Nile matched curves of the human body, going from the sacrum, which had its specific curve, through the stomach area, and then the Nile following along the rib cage perfectly, going up to the neck perfectly, and then the skull sitting up there, just like everything I have been saying so far, all confirmed. And so I come across this piece of alchemy by Arishwar de Lubix, and I don't know if he did this or if he grabbed this from, because it's right on the money as far as being exact. And so I don't know if he got this from an ancient hieroglyphic or if he did this himself or what. But this is showing the same thing that I have been showing. There's a couple things on this you're going to notice. Notice where this guy is standing, and notice where his eye is. His eye is right in the center of this tree. What this tree actually is, it is a larger face. And notice that they're both faces pointing to the right, that same profile look that I have been showing everybody forever, from Orion Nebula to the Nile and everything. It's that same profile look. Why? Why is this happening? Well, I want you to notice where the eye is. The eye is in the same area as the pineal gland. So I decided to start doing some experimenting. And, of course, I came up with this one first. What I had noticed was the angles were the same. The angle of his body from the bottom of his foot to the top of this brain stem where the thalamus is. And I knew that the area that it was interested in was the pineal gland, so I needed to match the eyes up. And then I realized that there was actually something provided on this for me so that it wouldn't look odd like this. I didn't see it quite at first, but let me just show you what that is. What's actually provided on this thing is on his clothes there is a slot to let you know to put the brain stem right through there, and it ends just like we've seen before, where we saw the toe being important. Where they place their feet has something to do with alchemy, on where things are supposed to be lined up when you start putting the puzzle pieces together. And so when they put their toes in certain places, it gives you a guide to use. Interesting, huh? But this right here gives us the guide so that when you place the brainstem on there, which is the same length as his whole body, you can see that when it's stretched out, that there's a lot of different things about this. You're going to notice there's these two black lines right here that follow the line of this area on the corpus callosum. Here's something else that's kind of weird. This area that you see right here, that is a natural line separating between his chin and this, I forget what the anatomy is called, but it sits right underneath the pineal gland. Obviously the pineal gland is where his eye is. But it follows the line of his chin just perfectly. Okay? And his eye ends up, you're also going to notice the branches of the tree, and notice the pons, okay? The pons comes up, follows the branches, this comes up, follows the branches, comes around, and notice that the way this thing is shaped is exactly the way it would be in a head if a head was pointing directly to the right, okay? So that's also important as well. So this is what we're looking at. This is definitely what we're looking at right here. And so what is being shown here is it's being... I want you to visualize for a second. The ancient Egyptians believed that everything in the universe are smaller and larger scales of man. And what we see constantly is we see these, I have seen these various scales of man, and I've shown you the one that's on the Nile. And, I don't know why that does that, but it definitely is matching the human body. It's not just as simple as saying, oh, well, everything in the universe uses phi. Well, yeah, but nothing matches the human body like that except for the human body. It has a unique design. And what we saw when we mapped out the Nile was that the various areas, from all the way down to the root, and then all the way up the body, matched the phi of the human body, even up to the Nile, and the areas of the Nile and the waterways and everything I'm showing you. This has to do with reality. And the significance of this larger and smaller scale thing that we have here is if you could visualize, for example, now what we do is we have this large one here, and then we have him, and then just imagine that we create a smaller pyramid inside his head, and we just keep going smaller and smaller and smaller. What's actually happening would be, if you visualized, it would be something like a vortex. And that's exactly what the pineal gland is, and it all seems to end right there. So, so I've got some stuff I can show you when we start getting into the Orion Nebula. We're going to even confirm this even more, because this same profile look that you're seeing right here, this same thing is what I had been showing people now for months, and people thought I was nuts. But this is exactly what the alchemy is showing us. This is what we're seeing in R.A. Schwaller de Lubbock's. And so what I did to confirm this was I took the tree and I actually put it on top of the skull to see what happened. And sure enough, when I lined it up right down that area on his clothes, everything lined up perfectly, and his eye is sitting right there where the pineal gland is. So this is what this is. This tree is, and him standing there with his eye like that is showing us this larger and smaller scale of man that continues on and on. So it probably gets infinitely large and infinitely small, all ending in something called the pineal gland, which is some kind of a vortex. Now, I cleaned this up a little bit, and if you remember, there were some key things on this. Remember I was telling you about the toe again? Well, his toe is right on this. You have to make sure that they are right on the money as far as where they're supposed to be. But his toe is right there, and this was staph. I mean, remember this also. This lined up to his leg, as well as that lined up to his leg. And look at the way that line goes right under him. These guys were so amazingly exact with all this stuff. It just freaks me out how exact they are with everything. But they have to be in order to show this kind of stuff. So here's what I figured out about this. This was staph. Let's put it this way. I'm 100% sure that this has something to do with the measuring the spinal column. And here's why I say why. Even down to the smallest details right here where you see this, it looks like these two prongs coming down. Well, there's a reason why those are there, believe it or not. I'll show you why. And also, you remember this, how the way these certain things lined up. There's one that runs along the top of his thumb, and then you can see how this one dips down right here. This is the very top one right here. And then there, right there, is where the throne is, where the throne sits. And then we go up, and then the eye sits right up here. So let's take a look at this a little bit deeper. So I decided to use my new pretty skull that I have right here. Some interesting characteristics I'm going to show you. What I discovered is the end of that staff. It's really important because see the way the coccyx comes around and then it actually stops right here. Well, what that staff does, in order to get it lined up exactly right, is the coccyx comes around and then the coccyx sticks out right here, just like this little area right here. This part of the two-pronged part of the staff has to spear the very top of the very tip of the coccyx, and that's how you know you're right on the money. The spine has to be perfectly erect because when you're inside the Queen's chamber, as you can see right here with the transparency, he has to be actually grabbing the spinal cord itself. Notice when you transparent this is the spinal cord running up right here, as you can see, going all the way up into the neck right here. So what he's actually doing is he's actually grabbing the spinal cord itself. And that has to be right on the money and everything erect. Now here's the next thing. Here's how else you know. This right here, you see how it dips down a little bit? It follows the same line as this part of the vertebrae. And this right here sits right on top of this thing. This one corresponds to this vertebrae. This one corresponds to this vertebrae. And then when you get down here, this vertebrae that sticks out longer corresponds to this one, and this vertebrae that sticks out longer corresponds to this right here. All these have to do with the vertebrae. And then you get up here, and you can see where I told you the throne is sitting, right on top of that area right there. And then you go to the pons area, and then bingo, right at the pineal gland. So this is exactly what this area is. And take a look at all these lines. You have lines going down his arm. You can see where it comes up to his waist area, and the way that these sit, right? See that bump sticking out of his leg? It's almost like the level of detail and planning and everything else that went behind this is mind-boggling. You couldn't just do this with anything. All these things are lining up, and they're showing me the same thing that I had been showing everybody now for months. All these factors are absolutely ridiculous. Let's go to the next part. Now let's review the Nile here. And remember, this is a larger scale of man right here that we saw. Everything maps to phi. As you can see, there are specific areas on the Nile that are showing that it's matching man as you go from the sacrum up, and then right as it hits the rib area on this phi line, the Nile moves out and back in according to the rib cage, and then it goes right up the neck, and then right here is the throne area, which begins, and if you notice, this Nile begins to separate. This is all according to what you would see. This area that you see right here is Osiris right here. You have these little gray areas that you can always use, and you just follow the Nile up through here. If you follow the Nile up through there, Osiris is actually right there. Okay? And there's a little skull I kind of put there to show you. You can see how it kind of opens up into the skull. And you can see how these the Suez Canal right here actually goes through the eye sockets. And then this area right here goes with the opening, or if you were to look at a skull. So now let's take a look at this part. So as I suspected, by measuring from the very tip of the sacrum at the Great Pyramids, doing a smaller scale of man, and going up, it ends right in the pineal gland, right where Osiris is, as a smaller scale of man using the pyramid. Notice that where the pyramid's base is where the throne is. As you can see, the base of the pyramid right here, the one that was overlaid and being used, we're using the same technique. We're just making a smaller version of man, and it ends right in the same area. So this is following the same logic that we saw in the alchemy. The throne being right here as well. So we see right here that the same thing is following, and now right here is the larger skull laid on top of it. And just like we saw in the tree, the skull, and notice the Suez Canal following through the eye sockets. Everything is just the same. And notice the throne is resting right on top, the base of the pyramid. And the brainstem is following right down the throat of the Nile. Okay? And so, with the brainstem following right down the Nile, the throne resting on the base of the pyramid, then you find that it ends right exactly where the pineal gland is. And this, by the way, is the exact location of Osiris, where the pineal gland is, and the mysterious place of where the soul is found. Now you know why. It's because what we're seeing are larger and smaller scales of man. Now I have a larger scale of man here, a larger one than this skull right here that we've seen before. And as we start looking into the Orion Nebula, and starting to see how it plays, the same profile that you're seeing right here, the same thing you saw in the alchemy, and the same thing that I had been showing everybody for months before I saw any of these hieroglyphics. And the Great Pyramids, as I thought, the design inside of there, and based on the Nile being a different size man, and what I had previously found with the Orion Nebula showing the same profile The same profile that we're seeing right here, that we're seeing on the Nile and everything. There's a reason all that's happening. It's showing us something about consciousness. It's showing us something about reality. We have all these different scales of man, and they all end like a vortex right inside the pineal gland. There's something going on here about reality. So hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll pick it up next time. May start transitioning into Orion. We may be there ready for that yet, in case I find any more hieroglyphics to take a look at. So y'all take care, and I'll talk to you soon.